She traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man she had never met. But when Eleanor Shaw arrived at that locked gate in Montana, her groom was gone, vanished. No explanation, no apology, just an empty house and $11 to her name. Then a stranger appeared, a cowboy with haunted eyes and a rifle aimed at her chest. What he offered her was not love. It was a deal, work for shelter, no questions asked. But what Eleanor discovered on that ranch would change everything. A dead wife's secrets, a killer hiding in plain sight, and a truth so dangerous that speaking it could get them both killed. This is not just a love story. This is a story about survival, about two broken people who found each other at the edge of nowhere. About a woman who refused to run when running was the only safe choice. Stay until the end, because what happens at that hanging will take your breath away. This story reminds us that home is not a place. It is the person who chooses you when no one else will. It teaches us that our past does not define our future. That strength is not about never falling. It is about standing up every single time, and that the deepest love often grows from the hardest ground. If you have ever felt unwanted, abandoned, or lost, this story is for you, because Eleanor proves that your story is not over. Your best chapter might be waiting on the other side of the worst day of your life. If this story touched your heart, do me a small favor. Hit that like button so more people can find Eleanor's journey. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. Now go out there and be someone's Caleb. Be the person who sees someone standing at a locked gate and offers them a chance. The gate would not budge. Eleanor wiped her brow and tried again, ignoring the way her corset dug into her ribs. She had traveled 2,000 miles for this moment, 2,000 miles on rattling trains and dusty stagecoaches, 2,000 miles toward a man named William Dockery who had promised her a home, a future, a place where she finally belonged. But the house beyond the gate sat dark and shuttered. No smoke from the chimney, no movement in the yard. No husband waiting to greet the bride he had sent for 6 months ago. Eleanor felt the weight of her small pistol hidden in her skirts. She was not a helpless woman. She had learned that lesson young. In the orphanage, helpless girls disappeared. They were sent to factories or worse. Eleanor had survived by being useful, by being smart, by keeping a weapon close and her eyes open. The click of a rifle being cocked made her freeze. She turned slowly, one hand drifting toward her hidden gun. A man sat astride a dark bay horse on the other side of the fence line, tall in the saddle, broad through the shoulders, sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of river stones. Gray-green and unreadable. His rifle was aimed directly at her chest. "Last person who tried to break into Dockery's place lost 3 fingers," he said. His voice was rough and careful. "How many you looking to keep?" Eleanor drew her pistol and aimed it back at him. They stared at each other across the fence. 2 people pointing guns, neither willing to back down. The man's eyebrows rose slightly. That was the only sign of surprise he showed. "You handle that like you know how to use it," he said. "I do." Silence stretched between them. The horses shifted. A hawk cried somewhere in the distance. Finally, the man lowered his rifle. Not all the way, just enough to show he was willing to talk. "You are the mail-order bride," he said. It was not a question. Eleanor kept her pistol raised. "How do you know that?" He nodded toward the crumpled letter clutched in her other hand. The paper had gone soft at the creases from being read too many times. "Dockery showed me that letter 3 months back, bragging about the pretty bride coming from Boston." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Where is he?" The man's jaw worked like he was chewing over words. "Gone. Sold everything 3 weeks ago. Took the stage east. Did not leave word where he was headed." The world tilted. Eleanor felt it physically, the way the horizon seemed to slide sideways. But she locked her knees and stayed upright, because falling meant being seen as weak. And weak women did not survive. "That is not possible," she heard herself say. "We had an arrangement, a contract. Dockery is a snake." The man's voice held no sympathy, only hard truth. You are lucky you did not meet him. Lucky. Eleanor almost laughed. Lucky. I have $11 and nowhere to go. That is not luck. That is a different kind of prison. The man studied her for a long moment. She saw him take in the scar on her wrist, the trained way she held her weapon, the steel in her eyes despite the desperation in her situation. Then he did something unexpected. He holstered his rifle and dismounted. I need help on my ranch, he said. Pay is room and board. No questions about your past. No promises about your future. You work, you stay. You do not, you leave. That's simple. Eleanor stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I need help and you need a place to stay. He shrugged. Seems practical. It was not kindness, not charity, just a transaction. And somehow that made it easier to accept. Eleanor lowered her pistol. What is your name? Caleb Monroe. I own the land west of here. Eleanor Shaw. Something flickered in his gray-green eyes, but he only nodded. Get your things, Miss Shaw. We are burning daylight. They rode in silence for the first mile. Eleanor sat stiffly on the horse Caleb had borrowed from Dockery's abandoned stable. She did not trust this man, did not trust anyone. But she had learned to survive by taking calculated risks. The land stretched endlessly around them, golden grass studded with sage, mountains blue and distant on the horizon. The sky so vast it made Eleanor feel small in a way that was both terrifying and strangely freeing. They passed a small grave marker by the trail. Eleanor saw the name carved into the weathered wood. Sarah Monroe, 1845 to 1872. She started to ask, but Caleb's face went stone cold. Do not. One word. Final. Eleanor fell silent. She understood some wounds were too raw to touch. They rode on. The sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. As they crested a small hill, Caleb's ranch came into view. A cabin built from rough-cut logs, a weathered gray barn, a corral with horses watching their approach with mild interest. It was modest, but it was clearly cared for. Fence lines straight, garden plot showing rows of green. A bench by the front door positioned to catch the evening shade. This is it, Caleb said. It is not much. Eleanor looked at the little ranch and felt something strange loosen in her chest. For years she had lived in cramped spaces, shared rooms, narrow beds, places where she was always in the way. This felt different. The front room has a door that bolts from inside, Caleb continued. You take that. I will sleep in the barn. Eleanor glanced at him sharply. You would give me your room. I would give you a locked door between us. He met her eyes directly. I do not know you. You do not know me. But I know what happens to women alone on the frontier. I am not inclined to let that happen when I can prevent it. There was no warmth in his voice, no expectation of gratitude, just practical concern for her safety. Eleanor nodded slowly. All right, then. They dismounted, and Caleb showed her inside. The cabin was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, shelves lined with supplies, everything necessary for survival. Eleanor noticed small touches that did not match the masculine simplicity. Blue patterned dishes, a rag rug, dried wildflowers hung from the rafters. Sarah's presence. Still here. Caleb caught her looking. Those stay where they are, he said quietly. I was not going to move them. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite gratitude, but close. Get some rest, Miss Shaw. Work starts at dawn. He left, and Eleanor stood alone in the cabin that was, for tonight at least, shelter. She walked to the window and looked out toward the hills. The last light of day was fading. Shadows stretched long across the grass. And there, on a distant ridge, she saw something that made her breath catch. A figure. Thin. Female. Watching. Eleanor blinked, and the figure was gone. She told herself it was a trick of the light, exhaustion playing games with her mind. But that night, when she went to the well for water, she found footprints in the dust outside her window. Small footprints. A woman's boot. Someone was watching the ranch. Eleanor woke before dawn. She had not slept well. Strange sounds in an unfamiliar place. The creak of the cabin settling, wind moving through grass. And always in the back of her mind, those footprints. She dressed quickly in the dim light and stepped into the main room. A man sat at the kitchen table. Not Caleb. This one was younger, maybe 28. Handsome in a rough way, with dark hair and a charming smile that did not reach his eyes. His boots were propped on the table, muddy soles leaving marks on the wood. "Well, well," he said. "Caleb brought home a stray cat." Eleanor studied him coolly. "Cats have claws." "Mind your face." The man laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Name is Jeb Hawkins. I work this ranch. Eleanor Shaw. I know who you are." He swung his boots down and stood, moving closer than necessary. "The whole territory is talking about Dockery's runaway bride." He looked her up and down with open assessment. "Cannot say I blame him for sending for you, though. You are easy on the eyes." Eleanor did not step back. She had faced worse than cocky ranch hands. "Is there a reason you are here, Mr. Hawkins? Or do you just enjoy making yourself unwelcome?" Something flickered in Jeb's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Hard to tell. Before he could answer, the door opened and Caleb walked in. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Jeb." Caleb's voice was flat. "You are early. Wanted to meet our new guest." Jeb's smile was all charm now. Make her feel at home. Caleb looked between them. Whatever he saw made his jaw tighten. "Stable needs mucking," he said to Eleanor. "Finish before noon, you eat. Do not finish, you do not. No kindness, no encouragement, just expectation." Eleanor nodded. "Show me where to start." The work was hard. Harder than anything Eleanor had done in the orphanage or the boarding houses or the laundries where she had worked to save money for her journey west. Her shoulders ached, her hands blistered, sweat soaked through her dress. But she did not complain, did not slow down, did not give anyone reason to say she could not handle frontier life. And she did it her way. As she worked through the stable, she reorganized the tools, hung them in order of use rather than scattered randomly. She noticed one of the horses favoring its left foreleg and found an infected hoof that had been neglected. Using knowledge from the orphanage, where she had helped in the small infirmary, she cleaned and treated it. She did not mention either thing to anyone. At noon, Eleanor walked into the cabin, dirt-streaked and exhausted. Caleb was at the table with a plate of food. Without a word, he pushed a second plate toward the empty chair. Eleanor sat. The food was simple, beans and bread and salt pork. But she was hungry enough that it tasted like the finest meal she had ever eaten. Caleb watched her eat. "You treated the gray mare's hoof," he said finally. Eleanor paused. "Yes." "Where did you learn that?" "Orphanage in Boston. We did not have money for doctors. Learned to handle things ourselves." Caleb nodded slowly. Something in his expression shifted. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. That evening, an extra portion of meat appeared on Eleanor's plate. Neither of them mentioned it. The trouble started that night. Eleanor was drifting towards sleep when she heard shouting outside. She grabbed her pistol and ran out to find chaos in the yard. The cattle pen gate hung open. 30 head of cattle were scattering across the moonlit prairie. Caleb was already on his horse, riding hard after the herd. Jeb was mounting up more slowly, a smirk on his face that he hid when he saw Eleanor watching. She knew then. This was no accident. Eleanor did not wait for permission. She found a horse mounted bareback and rode into the darkness. The next 2 hours were brutal, chasing cattle by moonlight across unfamiliar terrain. Eleanor fell twice. scraped her hands bloody on rocks, tore her dress on sagebrush. But she did not stop. When she finally herded the last steer back into the pen, her whole body shook with exhaustion. Blood dripped from her palms, her lungs burned. Caleb was waiting by the gate. He looked at her bleeding hands, her ruined dress, her determined face. "You did not have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked toward the barn. Eleanor heard raised voices, Caleb and Jeb arguing. "She does not belong here, Caleb. You know that. That is not your decision to make. Sarah would never have wanted—" The name hung in the air. Sarah. "Do not," Caleb said. His voice was dangerous. "Do not bring her into this." Silence. Eleanor crept back to the cabin, her mind churning. Who was Jeb to Caleb? Why did he hate her so much? And what did any of it have to do with Sarah? She found answers that night, though not the ones she expected. Unable to sleep, Eleanor explored the cabin with a candle. She found a loose floorboard under the bed. Hidden beneath it was a wooden box containing letters. Sarah's letters. Eleanor knew she should not read them. They were private, sacred. But she needed to understand what she had walked into. She opened the first letter and began to read. The handwriting was elegant, educated. The words were full of love at first, then gradually darkened. He came back from the war with dead eyes. "I try to love him enough for both of us. It is not enough. Nothing is enough." And later, "I told him I cannot have children. He said it did not matter. But I saw his face. And finally, some nights I think about the river. How quiet it would be." Eleanor's hands trembled as she set down the letters. Sarah had not died of illness. The truth was darker, much darker. The next morning, Eleanor made a decision. She found Caleb at the breakfast table and sat across from him. "Someone has been taking food from your smokehouse," she said. "And someone has been watching this ranch." Caleb's face went carefully blank. "Probably animals. Coyotes." Eleanor leaned forward. "Coyotes do not wear women's boots." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the morning birds sang. Inside, the air felt heavy with secrets. Caleb looked toward the mountains. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Stay away from the North Ridge. That is not a request." Eleanor met his eyes. "Who is up there, Caleb?" He did not answer, but she saw something flicker in his expression. Fear. Not of her. Not of the mountains. Fear of what she might find if she went looking. That night, Eleanor lay awake listening to the sounds of the frontier. Wind through grass, coyotes calling in the distance, the creak of the cabin settling around her. And underneath it all, a question that would not let her rest. Who was the woman on the ridge? What did she know about Dockery? And why was everyone so afraid of the truth? 3 weeks passed on the Monroe Ranch. Eleanor fell into a rhythm she had never known before. Up before dawn, work until noon. Rest during the worst heat, work again until sunset. Sleep deep and dreamless in a room with a door that locked from the inside. She learned the land, learned which creek beds ran dry in summer and which held water year-round. Learned to read weather in the clouds and predict storms before they hit. Learned the names of plants and animals that had only been pictures in books back east. And she learned Caleb Monroe. He was not an easy man to know. He spoke only when necessary, showed emotion rarely, kept walls around himself high and thick. But Eleanor saw through the cracks. She saw how gently he handled the horses, how carefully he mended fences, making sure every post was straight and every wire tight. How he paused sometimes at sunset, looking toward Sarah's grave with an expression that held grief so deep it seemed bottomless. He was a man haunted by ghosts. Eleanor understood that. She had ghosts of her own. Jeb remained hostile, but he had stopped sabotaging her work. Whatever Caleb had said to him that night in the barn had been effective. Now Jeb simply ignored her, which Eleanor preferred. But there was something wrong with him. Something she could not quite name. The way he watched Caleb with grief and suspicion in equal measure. The way he sometimes started to speak, then stopped himself. The way he looked at Sarah's grave when he thought no one was watching. He was hiding something. They all were. On a Tuesday morning, Caleb announced they were going to town. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. She had not left the ranch since arriving. The territory beyond Caleb's fence line was unknown territory, dangerous territory. But she needed supplies, fabric for new clothes, soap, thread, things that made the difference between surviving and actually living. She dressed in her best traveling clothes, which were not very good anymore, and climbed onto the wagon beside Caleb. The ride to town took 2 hours. They passed other ranches, other homesteads, other people carving lives out of this wild land. A few waved. Most just stared at Eleanor with open curiosity. The town was called Redemption, a single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church with a white steeple, a jailhouse with bars on the windows. And standing in front of that jailhouse, watching their wagon approach with cold eyes, was a man wearing a sheriff's badge. Silas Crane was tall and silver-haired, with a grandfatherly smile that did not match the calculation in his gaze. He walked toward them as Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. "Caleb Monroe, it has been a while." "Crane." Caleb's voice was neutral. "Careful." The sheriff's eyes slid to Eleanor. "And who is this?" "Eleanor Shaw." She kept her voice steady. "Mr. Monroe was kind enough to offer me work when I found myself stranded." "Stranded?" Crane's smile widened. "Ah, yes, you are the Dockery bride. The whole territory has been talking about you. I imagine they have." Crane stepped closer. Something in his posture made Eleanor want to reach for her hidden pistol. "I make it my business to know who is in my town, Miss Shaw, especially newcomers with interesting backgrounds." The way he said interesting backgrounds made Eleanor's blood chill. He knew something, or wanted her to think he did. "My background is not particularly interesting," she said. "Just an orphan looking for a better life." "Is that so?" Crane's eyes did not leave her face. "Well, I am sure we will become better acquainted. Enjoy your time in town, Miss Shaw." He tipped his hat and walked away. Eleanor released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Stay close to me," Caleb said quietly, "and do not talk to anyone about Dockery." The general store was cramped but well stocked. Eleanor gathered her supplies while Caleb spoke with the owner about feed prices. She was examining a bolt of blue fabric when the door swung open. William Dockery walked in. Eleanor's heart stopped. He was shorter than she had imagined from his letters. Thinning hair, weak chin. But his eyes were sharp and mean, and the smile that spread across his face when he saw her made her skin crawl. "Eleanor Shaw." His voice was slurred. "Drunk at 10 in the morning. My property, walking around like she owns the place." Caleb moved between them instantly. "Walk away, Dockery." "Or what, Monroe?" Dockery's smile turned ugly. "You going to shoot me in front of witnesses?" Eleanor felt the room holding its breath. Everyone watching. No one moving to help. Dockery pushed past Caleb. Before anyone could react, he grabbed Eleanor's arm. Before she could reach for her pistol, he backhanded her across the face. The crack echoed through the store. Eleanor staggered but did not fall. Blood welled on her split lip. Her eyes blazed with fury. She reached for her gun. "I would not do that, Miss Shaw." Crane stood in the doorway. His pistol was drawn. But it was not aimed at Dockery. It was aimed at Caleb. "Easy now, Monroe." The sheriff's voice was pleasant. "A man has a right to discipline his intended. She is not his intended." Caleb's hands shook with the effort of not killing. "She is not his anything." Dockery laughed. He leaned close to Eleanor, so close she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You know what happened to Rose Whitmore," he whispered. "Pretty girl, thought she could run too. They found her dress in the river, never found her." He pulled back, smiling. "Think about that, Boston girl." Then he turned and walked out of the store. Crane holstered his weapon and followed, pausing only to tip his hat at Eleanor. Welcome to redemption, Miss Shaw. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Eleanor sat rigid on the wagon seat, her split lip throbbing. She did not cry, did not tremble, but her hands shook where Caleb could not see them. "I should have killed him," Caleb said finally. "Crane would have shot you. Then where would I be?" Silence. Caleb stared at the road ahead. "During the war, I did things that do not wash off. Dockery knows what I was, what I'm capable of. Then why is he not afraid of you? He is afraid of Crane more, and Crane owns this town." Eleanor absorbed this. Who was Rose Whitmore? Caleb's jaw tightened. "A girl who came here like you. Answered a mail order ad. Where is she now?" River. Eleanor understood then. She was not the first woman Dockery had brought to this territory, and she might not be the last, unless someone stopped him. That night, Eleanor woke to screaming. She grabbed her pistol and ran toward the sound. Caleb's room. She burst through the door and found him thrashing in his bed, caught in a nightmare so vivid he did not know he was awake. His eyes were open but unseeing, staring at horrors only he could see. "Caleb." Eleanor moved closer. "Caleb, wake up!" His hand shot out and grabbed her throat. For a terrible moment, his fingers squeezed. Eleanor could not breathe, could not move. She stared into eyes that held no recognition, only the blind terror of a man still fighting a war that had ended years ago. Then awareness flooded back. Caleb released her and scrambled away, horror twisting his features. "God. Eleanor. I could have—" Eleanor rubbed her throat. "You did not. You should go." He was shaking. "I am not safe." She should have listened. Should have walked out that door and never looked back. Instead, she sat on the edge of his bed. "Neither am I," she said quietly. "Maybe that is why this works." Caleb stared at her. The moonlight through the window showed the tracks of tears on his face. Old tears, from the nightmare. Or maybe new ones. "What happened to you?" Eleanor whispered. "What happened in that war?" He did not answer for a long time. Then, slowly, he began to speak. He told her about the battles, the bodies, the faces of men he had killed. He told her about the sharpshooter's precision that had made him valuable, and the nightmares that had followed him home. He told her about coming back to Sarah, and realizing the man she had married no longer existed. "I was a ghost," he said, "walking around in a body, going through motions. She tried so hard to reach me, but there was nothing left to reach." Eleanor listened without judgment. She understood survival, understood doing what was necessary and paying the price later. When Caleb finally fell silent, she reached out and took his hand. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them let go. In the mountains, miles away, Rose Whitmore watched the lights in the Monroe cabin through her battered spyglass. She had been watching for weeks, watching Eleanor arrive, watching her work, watching her become part of the ranch, part of Caleb's life. "Run," Rose whispered. "Run while you can." But she knew Eleanor would not run. She had seen the way Eleanor looked at Caleb, the way Caleb looked at Eleanor. They were both already trapped, just like Rose had been, just like the women before her. And unless something changed, Eleanor Shaw would end up the same way, dead in the river, with no one to mourn her. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky was clear, the next clouds rolled over the mountains like a dark tide, swallowing the sun. Thunder cracked, lightning split the horizon, and rain began to fall in sheets so thick Eleanor could barely see the barn from the cabin window. "We are stuck inside," Caleb said. 3 days at least, maybe more. 3 days, in a small cabin, with Caleb and Jeb. Eleanor felt the walls closing in. The first day passed in tense silence. Jeb paced like a caged animal, shooting dark looks at Eleanor whenever Caleb was not watching. Caleb occupied himself with repairs, mending tack, sharpening tools, small tasks that kept his hands busy and his eyes averted. Eleanor returned to Sarah's letters. She had not told Caleb what she had found, had not mentioned the hidden box or the words that painted a portrait of a marriage slowly crumbling, but she needed to understand. The letters grew darker as she read. He does not see me anymore. He sees the war, the dead, the battles he cannot stop fighting. I stand in front of him, and he looks right through me. And later, the doctor says I cannot have children. Something damaged inside me. Caleb says it does not matter, but I see his face when he looks at the Henderson children playing in their yard. I see what he has lost without knowing he had it. And finally, words that made Eleanor's heart ache. Some nights I think about the river, how peaceful it would be. No more trying, no more failing, no more watching him slip further away while I stand helpless. I am so tired of trying. Eleanor closed her eyes. Sarah had not died of fever. She had found the empty laudanum bottle hidden in Sarah's sewing basket. The bottle that held enough poison to stop a heart. The bottle that explained everything. Caleb's guilt was not survivor's guilt. It was the guilt of a man who believed he had destroyed the woman he loved. The second night of the storm, Eleanor found Caleb sitting by the fire. He was holding a worn photograph. Sarah, young and smiling. Beautiful. She deserved better than what I gave her, he said without looking up. Eleanor sat beside him. What did you give her? Silence. Distance. A husband who is still fighting battles that ended years ago. That is not nothing. Caleb finally looked at her. His gray-green eyes were haunted. It was not enough, he said. I came back from the war and I was empty inside. She tried to fill that emptiness, tried so hard, but you cannot fill a void with love. It just swallows everything. Eleanor understood more than he knew. I have never been enough for anyone either, she said quietly. My whole life I was passed from hand to hand, not because I did anything wrong, just because no one wanted to keep me. I stopped expecting to be wanted. It is easier that way. Caleb looked at her, really looked, not through her, like he had with Sarah, at her. I wanted you to stay, he said slowly. That first day, I told myself it was practical. But he did not finish. Did not need to. Their hands brushed on the worn fabric of the chair. Neither of them pulled away. Jeb watched from the shadows. He had seen them together, the almost touch, the almost words, the connection building between two broken people finding pieces of each other. His hands clenched into fists. He had come to this ranch for one reason, to find out what had happened to his sister. To determine if Caleb Monroe had driven Sarah to her death. 3 months of watching, waiting, searching for proof. And now this woman, this stranger, moving into Sarah's home, taking Sarah's place. It was not right. But as Jeb watched Caleb's face, something he had not expected stirred in his chest. He had never seen Caleb look at Sarah the way he looked at Eleanor. And that changed everything. On the third morning, the storm finally broke. Eleanor went to check the livestock at dawn. The world was washed clean, every color vivid and sharp. Puddles reflected the sky. Birds sang in the dripping trees. She was walking toward the barn when she saw it. A message scratched in the mud with a stick. North Ridge, alone. Tomorrow. Signed with a symbol. A rose. Eleanor's heart hammered. She should tell Caleb, should show him the message and let him decide what to do. Instead, she kicked mud over the words and walked into the barn. She needed to know the truth. All of it. Even if it killed her. The next morning, Eleanor told Caleb she was checking the north fence line. He gave her a long look, the one that said he knew she was lying, but would not call her on it. Be careful, was all he said. Eleanor rode out alone. The North Ridge was rougher terrain than she had expected. Rocky outcroppings and twisted pine trees and ravines that dropped away without warning. She picked her way carefully, following a trail that was barely visible. Finally, she found it. A small cave hidden in the rocks. Eleanor dismounted and drew her pistol. "Hello," she called. "I got your message." Silence. Then a voice from the darkness. "Put down the gun." Eleanor hesitated. A woman emerged from the shadows of the cave, thin to the point of gauntness, wild hair matted and tangled, ragged clothes that had once been a nice dress, but her eyes were sharp, alert, alive. "You are the new one," the woman said. "I have been watching you." Eleanor kept her pistol raised. "Who are you?" The woman smiled. It was a terrible smile. The smile of someone who had been through hell and come out the other side. "My name is Rose Whitmore," she said, "and I am supposed to be dead." Rose's story spilled out in a rush. She had come to Montana Territory 18 months ago, answered a mail order ad from a man named William Dockery, traveled 2,000 miles full of hope and dreams of a new life. He was charming at first, Rose said, sweet, attentive. Made me believe he actually wanted a wife. "What did he really want?" Eleanor asked. Rose's eyes went hard. "Signatures on land deeds. When a woman marries, her property rights transfer to her husband. And when she dies, he inherits everything." Eleanor felt cold despite the sun. "What do you mean when she dies?" "Dockery does not want wives, he wants victims." Rose's voice shook. "2 women before me, both dead, both accidents. How did you escape?" "I heard them talking, him and Crane, about how they were going to do it. Make it look like a drowning. Weight me with stones. So I ran, jumped in the river before they could catch me. Let them think I drowned." She laughed bitterly. "Been living up here ever since. Too scared to go anywhere. Watching other women walk into the same trap." Eleanor's mind raced. "Why are you telling me this now? Because you are next." Rose stepped closer. "He wants you, Eleanor. And now that you have married Monroe, you have land. Property. Something worth killing for." Eleanor stared at her. "How do you know I married Monroe?" "I watch everything," Rose said simply. "I have nothing else to do." They talked until the sun began to set. Rose told Eleanor about Crane, about the murder he had committed years ago, about the body buried out past Miller's Creek, about how Dockery used that secret to control the sheriff. "They have the whole town," Rose said. "Everyone is either paid off or too scared to fight." "Then we go over their heads," Eleanor said. "The territorial marshal in Helena." Rose shook her head. "Helena is 3 days' ride, and Dockery is watching every road." Eleanor looked at the frightened woman before her. A woman who had survived through cunning and luck. A woman who had been hiding for 18 months while evil men went unpunished. "You do not have to hide anymore," Eleanor said. "Come back with me." Rose flinched. "I cannot. They will kill me. They think you are already dead. That is your power." Rose stared at her. "And you trust Monroe? Really trust him?" Eleanor thought about Caleb, his ghosts, his guilt, his gentleness with animals, and his violence toward threats, the way he looked at her like she was the first real thing he had seen in years. "I trust him," she said, "with my life." Rose was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, take me to him." Caleb stood in the cabin doorway, staring at Rose Whitmore like he was seeing a ghost. "You are supposed to be dead," he said. "I get that a lot." Rose's voice was steady, but Eleanor could see her hands shaking. They were in the main room now. Eleanor had brought Rose down from the ridge just as darkness fell. The journey had been tense, both women jumping at every sound. But they had made it. Now came the hard part. "Tell him everything," Eleanor said to Rose, "just like you told me." Rose looked at Caleb, at the rifle in his hands, at the suspicion in his eyes. Then she began to speak. The story was worse hearing it a second time. Eleanor watched Caleb's face as Rose described Dockery's scheme. The mail-order bride ads placed in Eastern newspapers. The women who answered, desperate for new lives. The marriages that lasted only until the paperwork was signed. 2 women dead, Rose said. Ellen McCarthy and Mary Jennings, both accidents. Both left everything to their loving husband. Caleb's knuckles went white on his rifle. And Crane. Sheriff covers it up, has to. Dockery knows about the man Crane killed. Body is buried out past Miller's Creek. Crane does whatever Dockery says. Why did you not go to the territorial authorities? Rose laughed bitterly. With what proof? My word against theirs. A sheriff and a landowner against a woman everyone thinks is dead. Who would believe me? Caleb looked at Eleanor. You believe her. Eleanor met his eyes. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. Finally, Caleb lowered his rifle. What do you need? He asked Rose. A place to stay, food, safety. Rose's voice cracked. I have been hiding for 18 months, eating scraps, watching other women walk into the same trap. I am so tired. Caleb nodded slowly. You can stay in the barn. It is warm enough. We will figure out the rest. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Caleb's voice was grim. Dockery is going to come for Eleanor sooner or later, and when he does, we need to be ready. The next few days were tense. Rose stayed hidden in the barn, venturing out only after dark. Caleb doubled the guards on the livestock and started wearing his pistol everywhere. Even Jeb seemed to understand that something had changed. He stopped his hostile silence and actually helped without being asked. Eleanor spent her days working the ranch and her nights planning. She had done the math. They could not go to the territorial marshal without leaving the ranch unguarded. They could not fight Dockery and Crane alone. And they could not hide forever. There was only one option left: marriage. Real marriage, legal and binding. If Eleanor was truly Caleb's wife, her property rights would be his. Dockery would have no legal claim, no excuse to come after her. It would not stop him from trying to kill her, but it would give them legal standing to fight back. She brought it up on the 4th night after Rose's arrival. They were sitting on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air smelled of sage and coming rain. I have been thinking, Eleanor said. Caleb glanced at her. That sounds dangerous. She almost smiled. We need to protect the ranch, protect Rose, stop Dockery from having any claim on me or my property. What are you suggesting? Eleanor took a breath. Marriage. Real marriage, with a certificate and witnesses and all of it legal. Caleb went very still. You would marry me, he said slowly. A man you have known for weeks. A man with blood on his hands and ghosts in his head. I would marry a man who gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go. A man who never asked for anything in return. A man who looks at me like I am the first real thing he has seen in years. Eleanor, I know it is not romantic. I know it is not what either of us imagined, but it is practical. It is smart. And it might be the only thing that keeps us both alive. Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. That is not the only reason I would marry you, he said. It is not even the main reason. Eleanor's heart stuttered. What is the main reason? Caleb turned to face her. In the starlight, his gray-green eyes were soft. You are the only person who has looked at me since Sarah died and not seen a monster, he said. You see my ghosts and you do not run. You see my darkness and you stay anyway. He reached out and took her hand. That is not nothing, Eleanor. That is everything. The wedding happened 3 days later, just before dawn in the small church in Redemption, with Jeb and Martha Henderson as witnesses and a traveling preacher who did not ask too many questions. Eleanor wore her best dress, cleaned and mended as well as she could manage. Caleb wore a suit that had probably been his father's. They stood before the altar in the gray light of morning and spoke vows that meant more than the preacher knew. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. The preacher smiled. You may kiss the bride. The kiss was brief, almost formal. But Caleb's hand lingered on Eleanor's waist, and Eleanor leaned into him just slightly, something real beneath the strategy. They signed the certificate. Eleanor's hand did not shake. As they walked out of the church into the morning light, she saw Crane watching from across the street. He tipped his hat, smiled. He knew what they had done, and he was not worried. The game was just beginning. That night, back at the ranch, Eleanor and Caleb stood in the doorway of the cabin they now shared as husband and wife. I can sleep in the barn, Caleb said. Nothing has to change. Eleanor looked at him. This man who had been a stranger 6 weeks ago. This man who had given her shelter and safety and something she had never expected. Hope. I do not want you to sleep in the barn, she said. Caleb's eyes widened. Eleanor, I am your wife now. That means something to me. I want it to mean something to you, too. It does. More than you know. Then stay. They looked at each other in the lamplight. Two broken people who had somehow found pieces of each other. Caleb reached out and touched her face. His fingers were gentle, tentative. Are you sure? He asked. Eleanor covered his hand with hers. For the first time in my life, she said. Yes. They did not make love that night. They lay beside each other in the darkness, not quite touching but not apart. Learning to share space. Learning to trust. Thank you, Caleb whispered, for staying. Eleanor did not understand then, but she would. The plan came together over the next week. Rose knew that Dockery kept records, land deeds with forged signatures, letters from Crane, even a journal where he documented his crimes with chilling precision. He is arrogant, Rose explained. Thinks he is untouchable. Writes everything down like he is proud of it. Where does he keep these records? Caleb asked. Safe in his house? The house where Eleanor was supposed to live. He has not sold it yet. Too busy celebrating his latest failure. Eleanor flinched at that. Latest failure. That was her. If we can get those documents, she said, we can take them to the territorial marshal. Proof of murder, proof of fraud. Enough to bring Dockery and Crane down. Caleb nodded slowly. I can break into that house. Done it before during the war. Reconnaissance. Not alone. Jeb spoke up from the corner. He had been quiet through most of the planning, but now his jaw was set. I am coming with you. Caleb looked at him. Why? Jeb met his eyes. Because I have spent 3 months here watching, waiting, looking for proof that you killed my sister. The room went silent. Eleanor stared at Jeb. Your sister. Sarah was my sister. Jeb's voice was flat. She wrote me letters. Happy at first. Then less and less. Then nothing. When I heard she died, I came to find out why. Caleb's face had gone pale. You thought I killed her. I thought something killed her. And you were the most likely suspect. What changed your mind? Jeb looked away. I found her letters. The ones she never sent. The ones that blamed herself, not you. And I found the laudanum bottle. Eleanor's breath caught. Caleb closed his eyes. She chose to leave, Jeb continued quietly. The war took too much of you. The silence took too much of her. It was not murder. It was tragedy. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. Jeb took it. Let us go get those documents, Caleb said. They rode out at midnight. Eleanor wanted to go with them, argued, demanded. But Caleb was immovable. You are the one Dockery wants, he said. If you are caught, everything falls apart. If you are caught, I lose everything anyway. Caleb cupped her face in his hands. I am not going to get caught. You do not know that. No. He leaned his forehead against hers. But I know that I am coming back to you. That is a promise. Eleanor wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this would not end with her standing over another grave. Come back to me, she whispered. Always. Eleanor and Rose rode to Martha Henderson's ranch to wait. Martha was a tough widow in her 50s who ran her spread alone and did not suffer fools. She had known Caleb for years and liked Eleanor from the moment they met. "Sit down," she commanded when they arrived. "Eat something." Worrying on an empty stomach never helped anyone. "I cannot eat," Eleanor said. "Then drink." Martha poured whiskey into tin cups. "Caleb Monroe is the stubbornest man in this territory. He will not let himself get killed before he finishes what he started." Rose sat in the corner, arms wrapped around herself. She had not spoken since they left the ranch. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long until we know?" Eleanor looked at the clock on Martha's wall. 6 hours until dawn. "We will know by then." The longest 6 hours of Eleanor's life. They waited. Martha kept the fire burning and the whiskey flowing. Rose dozed fitfully in a chair. Eleanor paced until her legs ached, then paced some more. Every sound made her jump. Every horse on the road could be Caleb returning, or Crane coming to arrest her, or Dockery coming to finish what he started. "Tell me about him," Martha said around midnight. "Caleb, what made you trust him?" Eleanor considered the question. He never asked for anything, never expected anything. He just offered help and let me decide. "That sounds like him." Martha smiled. When Sarah was alive, he was different, lighter. The war had already wounded him, but she helped him carry it. What happened? She got tired of carrying it alone. Martha's voice was sad, and Caleb was too lost in his own darkness to see that she was drowning. Eleanor thought about the letters she had found, the slow descent into despair, the final choice that no one could have prevented. "He blames himself," she said. "Of course he does." Martha poured more whiskey. "Caleb Monroe would blame himself for the weather if he could figure out how." "Do you think he will ever forgive himself?" Martha looked at her with knowing eyes. "I think you might be the one who helps him try." The sound of hoofbeats came just before dawn. Eleanor was at the door before Martha could stop her. Pistol drawn, heart pounding, 2 horses emerged from the gray light. Caleb, Jeb, both alive. Eleanor ran. She met Caleb as he dismounted, threw her arms around him, held on tight enough to bruise. He was dirty and exhausted, and there was blood on his shirt. "You are hurt. Not mine." His voice was rough. "We got the documents." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. "What happened?" "Later. Right now we need to get inside." That was when Eleanor noticed Jeb swaying in his saddle and the blood soaking through his shoulder. The next hour was chaos. Martha cleaned and bandaged Jeb's wound while Caleb explained what had happened. Dockery had been waiting. 3 hired guns had ambushed them in the house. "I killed one," Caleb said flatly. "Jeb took a bullet, getting us out." Eleanor looked at Jeb, pale and sweating, on Martha's kitchen table. "You saved his life. He is my brother now." Jeb tried to smile. "Family looks out for family." Caleb's hand found Eleanor's under the table. She squeezed tight. The documents were everything they had hoped for. Land deeds with forged signatures, letters from Crane acknowledging his role, and Dockery's journal filled with cold notations. R.W. River, March 15, weighted with stones, clean, E.S. failed, target married Monroe, new approach required, E.S. Eleanor Shaw. "He was planning to kill me," Eleanor said quietly. "He was planning to kill all of us." Caleb's voice was hard. "But now we have proof. So we ride to Helena." Rose spoke up from the corner. "Take this to the territorial marshal. Helena is 3 days away." Eleanor did the math. "And Dockery knows we have his documents. He will not wait." As if summoned by her words, hoofbeats sounded outside. Crane and 2 deputies rode into Martha's yard. Eleanor moved to the window. Her blood ran cold. "They found us," Crane's voice carried through the door. "Evening, Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Monroe, we have had a report of a disturbance at the Dockery property. Seems your husband might be involved." Eleanor looked at Caleb. He was already reaching for his rifle. Rose slipped out the back door, disappearing into the darkness. At least she would be safe. Caleb opened the front door, rifle in hand. Crane smiled when he saw him. The smile of a predator. Caleb Monroe. "You are under arrest for murder. I have a witness says you killed a man tonight." "I killed a man who was trying to kill me. That is not what the witness says." Crane's hand rested on his pistol. "You can come quietly, or you can make this difficult." Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. Then he saw the deputies, their rifles trained on Eleanor. "Come quietly," Crane said, "and your wife stays unharmed. Resist and—" He did not need to finish. Caleb lowered his weapon. Eleanor watched them put chains on her husband, watched them drag him toward the horses, watched her world crumble for the second time in 2 months. Before they took him away, Caleb looked back at her. "The documents. Get them to Helena." Eleanor nodded. Tears she would not let fall burned in her eyes. "I will hold on," Caleb said. "Come for me. I will burn this whole territory down if I have to." Crane laughed. "You have 3 days, Mrs. Monroe. That is when the hanging is scheduled." Then he was gone, and Eleanor was alone. The night after Caleb's arrest was the longest of Eleanor's life. She stood on Martha's porch, staring at stars that did not care about justice or love or the man in chains 3 miles away. The documents were hidden inside, proof enough to bring down Dockery and Crane and every corrupt official in the territory. But Helena was 3 days away, and Caleb would hang in 2. "You should go," Jeb said from the doorway. His arm was in a sling, his face pale from blood loss. But he was standing. "Take the documents and ride, and leave him. There is nothing you can do here. At least in Helena, you might find help." Eleanor turned to face him. In the moonlight, she could see Sarah in his features, the same jaw, the same stubborn set to his mouth. "When I was standing at that locked gate," she said slowly, "Caleb could have ridden past. He did not. That is not the same. It is exactly the same. He gave me a choice when no one else would. Now I am choosing to fight for him." Jeb was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right. What is the plan?" The plan came together in pieces. Martha sent word through the secret channels frontier women used. By morning, 5 women had arrived at the ranch, all of them wronged by Crane or Dockery or the system that protected them. Rebecca Mills, whose husband had been extorted by Crane until he lost everything. Agnes Crawford, whose sister Ellen had been one of Dockery's victims. 3 others with their own grievances and their own reasons to fight. "We cannot match them gun for gun," Martha said. "But we can outsmart them." "How?" Rose asked. She had returned after Crane left, shaking but determined. "We create chaos," Eleanor said. "Distraction, confusion. And while they are dealing with that, I get Caleb out." The women looked at her. "You would break a man out of jail," Agnes said, "against the sheriff and his deputies." Eleanor met her eyes. "I would burn this whole town down to save him." Something passed between the women then. Recognition, understanding. The knowledge that sometimes you had to become something dangerous to protect what you loved. "Tell us what to do," Martha said. The plan was simple enough that it might actually work. Phase 1. Martha and the women would march into the town square and create a distraction, shout about Crane's corruption, demand answers about Rose Whitmore and Ellen McCarthy. Draw attention away from the jailhouse. Phase 2. Jeb, despite his wound, would slip through the back streets and set fire to Crane's personal stable. Nothing distracts a town like flames. Phase 3. Eleanor would break Caleb out while everyone was occupied. Phase 4. They would ride to Helena together. Take the documents to the territorial marshal. Bring justice to Dockery and Crane. It could go wrong in 100 different ways. But it was the only chance they had. The night before the rescue, Eleanor rode to town alone. She found the window to Caleb's cell without difficulty. A small barred opening high on the wall of the jailhouse. She climbed onto a barrel and pressed her face to the gap. Caleb. A moment of silence, then movement in the darkness. His face appeared at the bars, bruised and bloodied. They had beaten him trying to get a confession, but his eyes were clear. "You should be riding to Helena," he said. "I am not leaving you." Eleanor. "When I was standing at that locked gate, you could have ridden past. You did not." She reached through the bars and found his hand. "You offered me a choice when no one else would. Now I am choosing. I choose you. I choose this." Caleb's fingers tightened on hers. "If this does not work, it will. If it does not." He swallowed hard. "I need you to know. These weeks with you. It is the first time since Sarah that I—" He could not finish. Eleanor pressed her forehead to the bars as close as she could get. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." They stayed that way for a long moment, not kissing. Something more intimate, two people holding on to each other in the darkness. "Tomorrow," Eleanor said finally. "Be ready. Always." She slipped back into the night. Behind her through the bars, Caleb watched her go. And for the first time in years, he prayed. Dawn came gray and cold. Eleanor dressed in men's clothes, hat pulled low, pistol hidden under her coat. She looked like a young ranch hand heading into town for supplies. No one would look twice. She rode toward redemption with her heart hammering and her hands steady. The women were already gathering in the square when she arrived. Martha at their head, voice carrying clear. "Sheriff Crane protects murderers. Where is Rose Whitmore? What happened to Ellen McCarthy?" People stopped, stared, whispered. Crane emerged from his office, face dark with fury. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning is that your time is up, Silas Crane." Martha stood her ground. "We know what you have done, and we are not afraid anymore." The crowd grew. Shopkeepers, farmers, mothers with children on their hips. Everyone watching as the women of the territory finally spoke the truth that had been silenced for years. Then came the fire. Smoke billowed from the direction of Crane's stable. The alarm bell rang. Half the deputies ran toward the flames. Eleanor moved. The jailhouse had only 2 guards left. Eleanor approached with a bottle of whiskey and a friendly smile. "Sheriff Crane sent me. Said you boys deserved a drink with all this commotion." One guard reached for the bottle. The other hesitated. Eleanor waited until the first one drank. Watched his eyes roll back. "Should have hesitated," she said to the second guard. Then she hit him with the bottle. The keys were on a hook by the door. Eleanor grabbed them and ran to Caleb's cell. Her fingers shook as she tried each key. Too slow, too slow. Finally, the lock clicked open. Caleb stumbled out, battered but alive. His smile was crooked through split lips. "Took you long enough. Had to make an entrance." She handed him a pistol from one of the unconscious guards. He checked it automatically. Military precision even now. "Can you ride?" she asked. "I can do anything if it means getting out of here with you." They emerged into chaos. The fire was spreading. People were running everywhere. The women were still shouting in the square. And there, in the middle of it all, was Dockery. He saw them and froze. Then his face twisted with rage. "You!" He pulled his gun, fired wild, missed. Townspeople screamed and scattered. That was when Rose stepped forward. She walked into the square, calm and deliberate, a ghost made flesh. Dockery's face went white. "No, you are dead. I watched you drown." Rose's voice carried clear. "You watched me fall. You did not watch me swim." The crowd went silent. "This man murdered 2 women," Rose said. "I was supposed to be the third. He works with your sheriff. They have been stealing land and killing innocent people, Agnes pushed forward. "He killed my sister, Ellen McCarthy!" Murmurs became shouts. The crowd shifted, becoming something dangerous. Dockery tried to run. Jeb blocked his path. "You are not going anywhere!" Dockery swung at Jeb. He was drunk and desperate and fighting like a cornered animal. His fist connected with Jeb's wounded shoulder. Pain exploded across Jeb's face, but he did not fall. "My sister was married to a man you called friend," Jeb said through gritted teeth. "You let her suffer while you built your empire of corpses. I do not know what you are talking about. Sarah Monroe." Jeb's voice cracked. "She is not here to face you, so I will." He swung. Dockery dodged, swung back. They traded blows in the dust of the town square, two men fighting for different kinds of justice. Jeb took a hit to the ribs, gave one back harder. Dockery stumbled. Jeb hit him again, and again, and again, until William Dockery was face down in the dirt, blood streaming from his nose, begging for mercy. For Sarah. Jeb stood over him, breathing hard. For Rose. For all of them. Crane tried to restore order. "Everyone, calm down." He pushed through the crowd, hand on his pistol. "This is hysteria. These women are lying." But the crowd was not listening anymore. They had heard Rose's testimony, seen Dockery's cowardice, watched the women of the territory stand up and speak truth to power. Something had shifted. Crane saw it, saw his world crumbling around him. He ran, mounted his horse, spurred toward the edge of town. Eleanor saw him. She was already moving. "Eleanor, wait." Caleb's voice came from somewhere behind her. But she was already on a horse, already riding, already chasing the man who had enabled murder and called it law. The chase led across the prairie. Crane's horse was faster, but Eleanor knew this land now, knew the shortcuts. The creek crossings, the places where the ground was soft and treacherous. She cut across the water, gaining ground. Crane looked back, saw her closing in. He turned and fired. The bullet whizzed past her ear. Eleanor did not flinch, did not slow down. She raised her pistol and shot his horse. The animal went down screaming. Crane flew from the saddle and hit the ground hard. By the time he stopped rolling, Eleanor was standing over him. His gun was gone. Lost in the fall. He looked up at her with fear in his eyes. "Please, I have money. I can give you anything you want." Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger. "Money will not bring back Ellen McCarthy, will not undo what you did to Rose, will not make up for every woman you let Dockery murder while you look the other way." "You are not a killer," Crane said desperately. Eleanor stared at him. She thought about pulling the trigger, about ending this the way he had ended so many others. Quick, clean, final. But that was not who she wanted to be. "No," she said, "I am not." She lowered her pistol. "But I am not afraid of men like you anymore." Hoofbeats behind her. Eleanor turned, weapon raised. But it was not Dockery's men. Not more deputies. It was the territorial marshal. 6 riders in dust-covered coats, badges gleaming in the morning sun. They had ridden hard for 2 days, summoned by one of Martha's contacts in Helena. They had arrived just in time. Justice came swift. Dockery and Crane were arrested by territorial authorities. Not the corrupt local law, but men who answered to the governor himself. The documents from the safe sealed their fate. Rose's testimony. Agnes's testimony. The journal where Dockery had written his crimes in his own hand. Murder, fraud, conspiracy. They would face trial in the territorial court in Helena. They would spend the rest of their lives in the territorial prison. No escape, no bought judges, no mercy. The townspeople tore down the gallows, the structure they had built to hang Caleb, wood and rope and the promise of false justice. Someone threw a torch. Eleanor stood in the square with her husband beside her and watched it burn. The flames climbed higher, orange and gold against the morning sky. Around them, people were hugging, crying, celebrating the end of a nightmare that had lasted too long. Martha found Eleanor and pulled her into a crushing embrace. "You did it, girl. You actually did it. We did it." Eleanor's voice was thick. "All of us together." Caleb found her later. They met in the middle of the chaos. Both battered, both bleeding, both alive. He reached for her. She fell into his arms. They held each other while the gallows burned and the crowd cheered, and a new day dawned over redemption. "You came for me," Caleb whispered. "I told you I would. You saved all of us." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but he was smiling. "We saved each other," she said. "That is what partners do." Then she kissed him. Not the quick kiss from their wedding, not the careful kiss of two people still learning to trust. This kiss was fierce and desperate and full of everything they had almost lost. When they finally broke apart, they were both crying. Neither of them pretended otherwise. Rose found them as the sun climbed higher. She looked different somehow. Taller, lighter, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "It is over," she said. "It is actually over." Eleanor took her hand. "It is over. And you helped end it." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "I hid for 18 months. Let other women walk into his trap because I was too scared to fight." "You survived," Eleanor said firmly. "That is not cowardice. That is strength. And when it mattered, you stood up. You told the truth. You helped bring him down." Rose looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled, the first real smile Eleanor had seen from her. "What will you do now?" Rose asked. Eleanor looked at Caleb, at the burning gallows, at the town that was finally free. "Go home," she said. "Build a life. The life we should have had all along." Rose nodded. "That sounds perfect. What about you?" "I do not know." Rose looked around the square. "Maybe stay here. Open a shop. Try to be something more than a ghost." "You were never a ghost." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "You were a survivor, and now you get to be something more." The weeks after the rescue were quiet. Eleanor and Caleb returned to the ranch and fell into a rhythm that felt different from before. Easier, more natural, like something had finally clicked into place. Caleb's injuries healed slowly. The beating in the jail had cracked ribs and blackened both eyes, but Eleanor tended him without fuss. Changed bandages, made sure he ate, read to him at night when he could not sleep. "I can do it myself," he protested. She ignored him. "You can, but you do not have to." That was the difference now. They did not have to do anything alone. The nightmares did not stop. Caleb still woke screaming sometimes, caught in battles that had ended years ago. Still saw the faces of men he had killed. Still carried the weight of every terrible thing he had done to survive. But something had changed. Eleanor was there. She held him through the worst of it. Let him shake and sweat and sob without judgment. "Tell me," she said one night. "Tell me what you see." So he told her. The battles, the bodies, the faces, the blood that would never wash off. She listened without flinching. "The war took pieces of you," she said when he finished. "It does not get to take all of you." "How do you know?" "Because you are here. You survived. And you chose to keep going even when everything hurt." She touched his face gently. "That is not weakness, Caleb. That is the strongest thing a person can do." He looked at her in the darkness. This woman who had walked into his life through a locked gate and a desperate circumstance. This woman who had seen his ghosts and stayed anyway. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he had spoken the words. Eleanor smiled. "I know." Jeb came to say goodbye a week later. His wound had healed clean, leaving a scar that would fade with time. He stood in the cabin doorway with his hat in his hands, and something like peace in his eyes. "I came here to find justice for Sarah," he said. "I found something better. The truth." Caleb met his gaze. I should have told you, years ago. I should have let you grieve properly instead of hiding what happened. You could not. Jeb shook his head. You were not ready, and neither was I. Where will you go now? Helena. The territorial marshal offered me a deputy position. Good pay. Honest work. He smiled slightly. Maybe I can make sure no one else goes through what Rose did. Caleb crossed the room and embraced him. They held each other for a long moment. Two men who had been enemies and were now brothers. Take care of yourself, Caleb said. Take care of her. Jeb glanced at Eleanor. She is something special. I know. Rose testified at the trial in Helena. Her words helped convict both men. Dockery and Crane were sentenced to 25 years each in the territorial prison. They would die behind bars, surrounded by the consequences of their crimes. Justice. Real justice. Rose returned to redemption afterward, not to hide, but to live. She used the reward money from the fraud conviction to open a small seamstress shop on the main street. I spent 18 months surviving, she told Eleanor on her first visit. Now I want to actually live. Eleanor looked at the neat rows of fabric, the careful stitches, the bright future Rose was building from the ashes of her past. You deserve this, Eleanor said. All of it. So do you. The first night they truly chose each other came a month after the rescue. Caleb had healed enough to move without pain. Eleanor had stopped sleeping with one eye open. They met in the middle of the bed with no barriers between them. When we got married, Caleb said quietly, it was strategy. I know. It is not strategy anymore. Not for me. Eleanor reached for him. It stopped being strategy the first night you did not sleep in the barn. That was 2 weeks in. I know. The intimacy that followed was slow and gentle. Learning each other. Not perfect. They were both carrying scars, but real, honest, present. Afterward, tangled together in the darkness, Caleb traced patterns on her skin. I love you, he said again. I should have said it sooner. I was waiting for you to figure it out. He laughed. A real laugh, rusty from disuse but warm. How long have you known? Eleanor smiled against his chest. Since you gave me that extra portion of meat the first week. And did not say a word about it. That was nothing. That was everything. He pulled her closer, pressed a kiss to her hair. Outside, the Montana night settled soft and dark around them. Inside, 2 broken people had finally found home, 1 year later. Spring had come to Montana territory. The grass was green, the wildflowers were blooming. The sky stretched endless and blue above the Monroe Ranch. Eleanor stood on the porch of the cabin they had expanded over the winter. 2 new rooms added to the original structure. A proper bedroom, a nursery. She rested her hand on her swollen belly and smiled. The morning ritual had become sacred. Caleb brought her coffee in bed now, carefully brewed and steaming. He would sit beside her while she drank, one hand on her stomach, feeling for movement. How are you feeling today? He asked. Like I swallowed a watermelon. He grinned. Beautiful watermelon. She threw a pillow at him. He caught it, laughing. This was their life now. Easy mornings, shared work, quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Eleanor had never known peace like this existed. Visitors came regularly. Jeb returned every few months, now a respected deputy marshal with stories and scars from his work. He always brought small gifts, fabric for the baby's clothes, books for Eleanor, good whiskey for Caleb. Rose came monthly from her shop in town. She had grown into herself over the past year, no longer the frightened ghost hiding in the mountains. She was building a life, a future. And Martha. Martha was a constant presence. The grandmother neither Eleanor nor Caleb had ever really had. She arrived with practical advice and homemade preserves in the rocking chair that now sat on the porch. For when the little one comes, she had said. Eleanor wanted to marry Caleb again. She told him on a spring evening, watching fireflies dance across the meadow. I want to marry you, she said. He looked at her with confusion. We are already married. That was survival. This would be choice. She turned to face him, this man who had changed everything. I want to stand up in front of everyone who said we would not last and say I choose him. Every day. Forever. Caleb's eyes went soft. Then let us do it. The second wedding was nothing like the first. Not dawn, not secret. High noon in the church at Redemption, packed with every person they knew. Martha stood as matron of honor, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Jeb stood as best man, straight and proud in his marshal's coat. Rose sat in the front row, tears streaming freely. The whole town had come. Farmers and ranchers and shopkeepers. People who had watched Eleanor and Caleb fight for each other and win. The preacher smiled at them both. Are you ready? Caleb looked at Eleanor. She looked at him. They nodded together. The vows were different this time. Caleb went first. His voice was steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. I was dead inside when you came here. Just a body doing chores, waiting to stop. You did not fix me. You showed me I was worth fixing. I promised to keep choosing you. In anger and in peace. In fear and in hope. Until they put me in the ground. Eleanor's turn. Her voice shook, but she did not care. I spent my whole life being passed from hand to hand. Never wanted, never kept. You looked at me covered in dust, pointing a gun at you, and you saw someone worth keeping. I promised to keep coming back, no matter how far I have to ride. The preacher beamed. By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Laughter rippled through the crowd. You may kiss the bride. This kiss was different from the first, longer, deeper. Witnessed by everyone who mattered. When they finally pulled apart, they were both crying. Neither of them pretended otherwise. That evening, they sat on the porch of their home. Eleanor in Martha's rocking chair, hand on her belly. Caleb beside her, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Boy or girl, he asked. What do you think? Does not matter. Eleanor smiled. They will be loved. Beat. That is not nothing, Caleb said. Eleanor looked at him. Remembered the first time he had said those words when she told him about her past. That is everything, she said. She looked toward the ranch gate. It stood open now, always open. Not because they were careless, but because they were not afraid anymore. What are you looking at? Caleb asked. The gate? What about it? Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Happy tears, the kind she had never known before coming to Montana. A year ago, I stood at a locked gate with nowhere to go. Now I have a ranch, a husband, a baby on the way, and a gate that is always open. Caleb took her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. That is what home means, he said. Eleanor leaned into him. This man she had found by accident and chosen on purpose. This life she had built from nothing but determination and love. Yes, she whispered. It is. The sun sank below the mountains. Stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. And Eleanor Shaw Monroe, who had traveled 2,000 miles for a promise that was broken before she arrived, finally found what she had been searching for all along. Not a husband, not a home, something more. A place where she belonged. A person who chose her back. A future worth fighting for. She closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of the Montana night. Wind through grass. Coyotes in the distance. Her husband breathing beside her. Her child stirring in her belly. Peace. Real peace. At last. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.